Good afternoon. Thank you for joining ATA's program today for our CLC Connection with history. My name is Leslie. I'm one of your peer mentors, and I'll be your mediator for today's event. We'll be diving into great conversation with our honored guest, Mr. McKinney, who I will introduce momentarily about our career education and transitions into the workforce. But before we get started, I want to cover some housekeeping items. This is an opportunity for you to engage, ask our guests many questions. To do so, please utilize the chat. If you have any questions or commentary, or you could ask your question out loud if you're in the live audience. Additionally, this event is recorded and made available to you later so you can rewatch or share with your peers. Without further ado, let's get started. So, Mr. McKinney, before we start, I'd like to ask you some icebreaker questions.
Sure.
So to be,
I'm fully vaccinated. My mask on.
Yes, you can.
Okay, good. Thank you. Much better. Thank you very much. You can hear me now. I'm gonna take this off also, just because I think you can hear me a lot better. We got folks in the audience. We also got folks at home that have some questions, but this will be very helpful to be able to breathe. Okay.
So my first question is, what is your favorite item that you bought this year?
Oh my goodness. So I buy a lot of things in auction, and I buy a lot of old historic Houston items. And it was kind of a year, maybe in 2 months ago, I acquired a really cool press release for the Shamrock Hotel. This is a 1947 press release that really gives, so somebody who's like myself, who's involved in public relations and journalism and in history, those old press releases really give us a story of what the individual wanted to promote about the property or the project that's going on. So what I focus on mostly is teaching Houston history to adults and to school kids on board my open air bus, the Houston History Bus. And we just do it in a fun way. And when we have great content about what somebody was thinking, in 1947, right? And, several decades ago, you're able to really kind of put yourself in their shoes. So that's great. And also comes a lot of old black and white photos of Houston that not many people have, because these press releases in a newsroom, typically they'll take them and then they'll discard them because they get so many of them, right? And this particular packet in its entirety in a binder was saved and preserved and then sold at auction. So I purchased that recently. I acquired that recently, so it's good.
That's great.
Where'd you get it?
I can't mention the auction house, but it's just an example of, it's just really great. These things are rare. And if you, like I said, if you're somebody who, understands journalism, you get a whole stack of these press releases every single week. It has all the who, what, when, where, and why, all the stats about a project that's going on. For example, the 1949 Shamrock Hotel, which opened on March 17, 1949, was this huge 1,100 room hotel that was really ahead of its time out there by the medical center, which is pretty much, at the time it was called Belmar Boulevard. Now it's called Holcomb Boulevard and Main Street. And it just gave us a lot of great stats about the property, but the photos are really key because those photos have not been seen before. So I've got to compile information and put it into some kind of a post I can put on social media, which I highly recommend, even the folks listening right now, to like and follow Mr. McKinney's Historic Houston and the Houston History Bus on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. One guy's doing it now, my buddy earlier. That's about it. Anybody else? Guys, go out there today. If you're watching from home, like and follow Mr. I'm going to say 1,001 times during this process, because what I do as an educator, but also as a performer, is I make sure you learn about Houston history in a fun and unique way. And we do it with free tours to the public. So those free tours are available because we're a nonprofit organization structured. We offer free tours. So somebody pays for them, so they're free to y'all. But you only get to get on board the bus when you like my social media sites. And I don't feel bad for anybody who's like, well, I don't have, and by the way, here are the handles. And I don't have, social media. Well, I've got 90-year-old ladies who get a Twitter account just to follow Mr. McKinney for a $40 free ride. So it's either pay for a ticket or you can come join us on the bus for free. We don't want your money, we want your likes, because that's how we promote Houston history to folks.
But if people wanted to get on, they are able to purchase a ticket?
Yeah, so good question. We don't offer any individual seats. We're not a tour company, so you can't just buy individual tickets. You have to, unless of course there's that free campaign going on, then you can sign up for a free ticket. But you can't buy individual seats. You have to buy 20 seats, which is a group. So most people know that, to where they understand it's a rare opportunity to get on board the bus, and they hurry up and like our social media sites, because then I launch on social media, and then I say, hey, go to this link and click right now. And Twitter, Instagram, Facebook is pretty instantaneous with people signing up. So, and 20 seats on the bus, it fills up fast. So,
And how often do you do these tours? Is it?
question, we go out all the time, whenever you have 20 people. So, yeah, it's.
So as soon as
Field trip?
Yeah, field trip, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we do, so before COVID, we had a whole series of free tours on a set schedule at mrmckinney.com. And people can go on there and they could sign up for a free tour. We had a free East End tour, we had a mural tour, we had a cemetery tour, we had a Post-Oak Galleria tour, and these are all paid. We had a hikes tour, and these were all paid for by individuals, corporate sponsors, folks in those areas that wanted to promote their business and of course promote the history that their business is located in the neighborhood, right? Because we do 115 different tours. We cover every neighborhood in Houston in detail on board the bus. And it's just something that is a fun way to learn about the city. And you don't think you're learning about it until you're really involved, because the bus stop is cut off. So you're seeing it from all over. Whereas most tour buses, you're looking out of a window, you're hurting your neck, you can't see what's going on. This, you see everything. And I think when you're forced to be engulfed in history, you're forced to pay attention.
and how do you include the pictures that you got from the newspaper?
Yeah, good question. So, well, and I talk about my journey a lot. And when I talk about my journey, I talk about being the president for the Friends of the Texas Room at the Downtown Public Library, the Julie Addison building. So being the president of the board, I have access to a lot of great images, and so do you. So does the general public. You can access these images I created a bit.ly link, a little condensed version of the link. It's www.bit.ly/H capital HMRC 76. Now you think that's a long link. The link the library has, and God bless them, the library is it's like this long. And I was like, nobody's ever going to remember that. And it isn't as user friendly as it could be. And the main reason why is you have to log into a back room because you're literally accessing 4.5 million images on an archive database. So it isn't something that you can just click onto right away, right? You have to actually go in and look it up that way. But I will show you an example on the screen, and you may not be able to see it too well, but I can describe some of the images that you're about to see on the screen. But that kind of takes you on a journey about what I do and how I got started and all that great stuff.
Could you repeat that link?
Yeah, it's www.bit.ly/capital H, capital M, capital R, capital C 76. We opened in 76. So it's HMRC, which is the Houston Metropolitan Research Center. We are going to be going through an eventual rebranding of that. But the truth of it is that organization has been around since the 1970s, and it's a repository for Houston archives. So all of our old maps, our old black and white photos of Houston's growth over the decades, family collections. There's a great Mexican-American or a Hispanic heritage collection, which has a great Mexican-American specific collection, the Sarabia family and people like that have donated their archives over the years, lots of great oral histories. So those are all available, on the archive, and they're free to the public. I let people know about this link and everything we do over at the HMRC at the Julie Addison Library, because you might go into a bar or restaurant, you might work for a bar or restaurant, you might own a business that you want to put old black and white photos of Houston on. And typically people will go online to our website and they'll take off a grainy image. And I'm just like, for $12, you can get the image from us. And it's a high res image. And we'd rather you do that because the money that we get actually goes to digitize more photos. So out of the 4.5 million photos we have, even another additional 4 million photos that are archived that aren't even digitized yet, because someone has to scan the photo in, clean the photo up. They have to put a bunch of metadata in the photos so where it can be searchable. And you'd be surprised. You might even be living in a neighborhood that you didn't even realize XYZ used to be there. Old Victorian mansions or a building that's gone now. Houston has a great way of redeveloping itself. We're a very pro-development city, meaning that we're continuously growing, right? And other cities don't have that same luxury, which means they're stagnant, right? Their cities aren't growing as quickly. I bring up the idea of growth for young people that are watching and listening in regards to education. Right now, you're focusing on education, and you're going to be moving forward into a city that is ready to welcome you in a job market, ready to welcome you into whatever type of field you want to go into, whether it's medicine, whether it's education, whether it's the arts, whether it's energy, whether it's, finance. The list goes on and on what Houston can offer you, and that's what makes Houston great. And Houston, unlike some other cities, has a very good way of welcoming folks that are from Houston, right? Like if you are homegrown, there's some cities where they look kind of down upon that, like, oh, well, you're not from the city, right? Where are you didn't get your degree here? Well, here in Houston, we're like, that's a plus. Anybody with the U of H or UHD connection is going to have a foot in the door right away, because chances are somebody has gone through the system, University of Houston and University of Downtown, they've gone through the system as a whole, and they have they got their bachelor's degree here, their master's degree, their associate's degree. They have a connection to the system, and they're very, very it's like a club, right? It's a special club. So I think you're on the right track because you've picked an institution that already has a strong reputation. And then U of HD, which separates itself from the whole system itself, has an even stronger reputation in that area too. So those are all good things.
And you're already doing a lot of great things, but if there was one thing you could be remembered for, what would it be?
You know, well, I'm blessed because it's my 21st year doing this. So I've been doing it for a while. And people, yeah, thank you, one person. No, it's good. It's been a pleasure. No, I just want to be remembered as somebody who was passionate and focused and dedicated on Houston history and a fun way of teaching it. So if I can be remembered for that, that's a good thing. And I think in working with young people, working with kids specifically at the elementary level and then on, there's a natural reaction. You get recognized as, oh yeah, that's Mr. McKinney. You know, and then the open air bus and then the overall way that we present history at Mr. McKinney's Historic Houston through PowerPoint presentations, going into schools, going into just speaking in groups like this, for example, with the visuals makes it fun and different. So I think I'm just going to keep plugging and plugging away, and hopefully folks will like and follow Mr. McKinney's Historic Houston and Houston History Bus. That's the greatest gift you can give me, because social media is a great way, you know, YouTube too, to learn, right? We're educating ourselves by learning visually on these social media platforms. And the great thing about social media and the internet is it's free, right? So we can sit there for hours and binge watch documentaries on YouTube and things like that, right? Or Instagram feeds and look at old black and white photos of Houston and learn about the city's past. And it doesn't cost us anything. We can do it at our leisure, right? We're waiting in between appointments or classes or whatever the case is at a red light, you know? So.
That's great. It seems like you're really enjoying what you do. So I want to start with the first question. It is, what is your educational background? How did you get into being a historian for Houston?
You know, it's hard. You can't get a degree in Houston history. Everything is self-taught. So obviously a lot of it is focused on that. You know, I've got a background in nonprofit arts management. I spent 12 seasons over at the Alley Theater and 5 years over at Theater of the Stars and 3 years over at Sages Theater. And I worked for the Building with Houston for a while. I was on their board for many years too. And so, yeah, just arts has been my focus, which I think it translates into how I present a talk about something that could be perceived to be boring as history, right? And not everyone likes history. Some people love history, some people don't like history, and some people, I think the most folks get fascinated about Houston history if you understand your audience and you can find a way. Like here we are in the beautiful 1939 Eminem building, right? So there's a lot of focus in history, you know, in this space that we're in right now, and even across the street, there's a lot of historic buildings that are kind of all sprinkled throughout the downtown area. So yeah, I mean, a building built in the 20s has a lot of character and history. So yeah, it's all self-taught. A lot of it is that, and a lot of it is just going into the library, looking at maps, and then really asking yourself, how did Houston grow and develop the way that it did? And a lot of my clients, people that I speak to, are really folks in the commercial real estate area. In fact, after this talk, I'm going to be going to a CCIM event, which is all commercial real estate folks, and doing a tour about the Post Oak Galleria area on board the bus. And we don't just talk about the Post Oak Galleria from the 1970s, Geraldine Hines' creation of the Galleria, which most people think about, which is a huge game changer for the area. We go even further back. We go back to 1959, you know, when Sackwich is located there, one of the very first retailers in the area. We even go back to the 1830s with the Moores family, the Braggs family, and other families that populated the area. So every place and every space has history. Just a matter of like digging deep, scratching the surface, and finding out where all that history's at.
And what made you want to focus on Houston history? Like what made that click where you were like, I want to study Houston's history? There's so much here. What was that?
You know, it started out in junior high, middle school. It started out when I was asking a lot of questions. At that age, you typically do ask a lot of questions, you know, why is something the way that it is? But also a lot of it was nobody else was really doing it, and they weren't doing it. And there are folks that do focus on Houston history, but we just do it very differently. And different is always a good thing, right? If I can separate myself from what they do, like no one else is taking a school bus and cut the top off because it's too hot in Houston, right?
Yeah.
You can't use it half the year. Yeah, that's the misconception. You can't use it, you know, half the year long. But I found a way to do that. We do a City Lights evening tour where it's all, you know, done in August. And, you know, August is Houston's birthday month, 1836, August 30th, 1836, when Houston was founded. So we, you know, we'll do evening tours of that time period, you know, and then even when it's really cold outside, like the Christmas light, we'll do Christmas light tours, you know, but we don't just do Christmas light tours, we do it in River Oaks, which is a very important neighborhood, 1924 to present day. River Oaks has all the who's who, all those mansions. So what our tour focuses on is the history behind the neighborhood. So I'm all about teaching and education. So if you're not learning on board the bus and having a good time, then I'm doing something wrong as a performer or as an educator, right? And some of y'all, actually all of us have had teachers throughout our lifetime, right? Someone who has been in the classroom, who we've really, really enjoyed their lesson. And we might not enjoy the topic. Maybe it's something as intimidating as math or the sciences, but we're like, but that person had a fun time teaching it. And we know that I had an experience learning about it because the way they taught it. So that's kind of what we look forward to, is how can we best get that information out there. And the old black and white photos help, and the locations help. And I'm careful not to do too many jokes, because the truth of it is, if you're in a store and you want to be taken seriously, the content you're giving, you don't want people, we'll be able to have a good time. And there's ways of putting people at ease through comedy and humor, but not doing it in a way where they think that what you're saying may not be factual, because you have to make sure, as an historian and as an educator, you're giving out facts. And that's also one of the reasons why I launched Mr. McKinney's Historic Houston, is I would, even as a young person, go on other people's tours, and they would be giving out information that wasn't always factual. And it was very easy to check. And this is all pre-Google. This is like, you can go to the library and look this information up in a city directory. You could look up certain things. And sometimes it was as simple as somebody making a mistake. They would be at an intersection. There's obviously 4 corners at an intersection, right? And they would say, see over there, that corner, that's where so-and-so house used to be. And I'm like, no, it's an odd number street. So it was actually on the side of the street. It's like they just didn't do the research and the homework well enough. And you look at that and you're like, they're giving bad information, because the problem with bad information is it continues, right? Then someone else repeats it, and someone else repeats it. All of a sudden we're quoting things that are bad. And it just takes one young savvy person to come along and say, that's been wrong all those years. The address says here, that's the side of the street it's on, so a lot of that happened too.
It's really interesting. And then, so you said that you have to go to like auctions and stuff to be able to get some of the material that you use in your tours and to put in these archives and to register them. How did you start getting into being able to get exclusive access to some of these places? What was that process?
Yeah, so a lot of it, I should go back and say, a lot of it, I get it from libraries. These are public sources, part of the public domain. So I want to encourage people out there that are interested in learning about their local history. You can get this information free of charge in these places. It's the idea of licensing the image and or getting a copy of it is where you want to be transparent with the organization that you're borrowing the image from, because it is their property. They're the stewards of the information. And, and to me, that's very easy to do, because everything I do is positive and education focused. When it comes to special nuggets of things I can purchase at auction, or a lot of things are actually donated to me. I mean, these are families, longtime Houston families that are like, look, you're the history guy. I want to entrust you with these documents because I know you'll take good care of them. And being on the board of 19 different museums and libraries and nonprofits here in Houston, I have access to, I know certain collections, there's different collections throughout. The Faulkner Library over the Woods Ridge, they have a great one over at Rice. There's U of H has a good library as well through their system over at MD Anderson. So is the one HMRC. So different libraries have different abilities to be able to manage and maintain and cold storage and preserve these documents. And then some of these libraries have already set up special collections. So if I know an organization has a very strong Jewish history collection like Rice University has, if a Jewish family were to give me information, I might selfishly give them to another, or not so give it to another organization, saying it's better off kept over here. Downtown Public Library, we've got a really good Mexican American collection. So if I come across a family, it's like, where should I take this stuff to? This library is going to be a better fit. And the reason why is, as a young person doing research on that topic, or a journalist doing research, all information is better if it's kept in one location, because you're going to less places, but also you're allowing somebody to piggyback off of that and paint a really, really good picture of everything there. So that's kind of why it's good to know these different collections, and you really only know them if you use them a lot. When you're constantly using these things as research and materials, then you're going to know them kind of like the back of your hand, and it's just very helpful.
I have a question for you.
Sure, question.
I know this is like a random question, but like, that one house that was by Hamilton and Commerce, that blue house, that's like.
Yeah, it's the 1905 Arthur Cohn house. Arthur Cohn was the personal business manager to a guy named William Marsh Rice. The home is actually older than 1905. We call it the 1905 house, but there's portions in the house that probably go back to the 1850s. That neighborhood's called Quality Hill, if not earlier. And the Quality Hill was a neighborhood developed in the 1850s and was pretty much off the map by 1938. And a lot of the homes in Quality Hill, about 90 houses, were taken by the railroad, the Union Station that's right there. It was built in 1911. They bought about 90 homes and turned it into a rail area. So yeah, but yeah, the home is significant. The home has history. Arthur Cohen was the first business manager for Rice University when it opened October of 1912. And then he also, like I said, he knew William Marsh Rice. They were friends, so, and business associates. So that's kind of cool to have his house. And that's the 1907 William Foley house is still there too, but it's been bought by the Annunciation Catholic Church that's there, and they renovated it and turned it into a rectory. So there's like 2 real good homes in Quality Hill that are still left. Other ones have been moved out of the area, but those are in the area, which is nice. Yes.
Fortunately, if you have to go, I am going on Zoom. I just want to ask this question in person. And
Sure.
then you listen in. I'm not sure if this question will be said later on, but from your point of view, since the saying goes that history repeats itself, right? From what have you seen personally that you would believe is repeating itself right now in our contemporary era? How is that repeating from what was or what happened back then?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the most topical topic of discussion is going to be the 1919 flu epidemic, right? We had that here in Houston. Like everything else, there's lots of places that totally shut down. The city shut down for a while. There were also folks that were not willing to put masks on at that time, even at that time too, right? This is before we had a vaccine like we have now. We've got a vaccine now. Things are somewhat better, obviously. So yeah, I think that's an example. It's a small example, but also from its development standpoint, Houston will continue to kind of repeat itself of tearing down its history. It's not going to keep it around because there's such a strong dollar amount on how do we keep this land. And I think that when you're so focused on developing a project, you don't care if that little house is in the way. And so what I have to do, and more people like myself that care about history, is we have to think outside the box. How can we strengthen that narrative about that particular house and then tie it to other things that matter to that developer? And then how can you work with folks like Geraldine Hines worked with Steve Zimmerman with LaCullum Door, which is that 1923 Walter Fawner mansion. How can you take that mansion and turn it into something that's valuable by making it the entryway? So we were able to keep that house. It's been kept for a while, since 77 when Steve Zimmerman bought it, but they built a tower behind it. So now it's the welcome lobby and restaurant to the big tower. So it complements it. So that's a lot of it too, is how do we educate people or re-educate so we don't make those same mistakes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
We have one question from the online chat.
Sure.
Yeah, can you tell us any cool history facts about the UHD building? I know Eminem was a warehouse, and I heard at one point this building was a mall or a department store.
Yeah, at the 1929 Eminem building that we're in right now, a manufacturing mercantile building, was really ahead of its time. A warehouse storage space. It had the trail, the MKT was not too far from here, just on the north side of the property where the Jesse H. Jones Center is at right now. But the railroad, the tracks underneath it, as you can see right now, they still go underneath it now, which is really cool. But at the corner of where, a lot of commerce happened. I mean, Commerce Street is named so for that same reason. The Port of Houston's across the way. The sad thing is the building opened right before the Great Depression. So the effects started to hit the area. So you had a building that wasn't being leased out and it was kind of doomed from the beginning, but it's an asset and it's been utilized for multiple things over the decades, as you mentioned earlier. And now it's probably found its greatest use, which is, educating people in a really special space. So I think to have this right at the corner of White Oak Bayou and Buffalo Bayou, where you can just see these great views of downtown Houston is a really special thing. So yeah, the building's a lot of history in this whole area. And I mean, the Fifth Ward Warehouse District is not too far from here. There's still lots of buildings that are left there. We lost a recent two-story warehouse building that was demolished to make way for some more high-end apartments. So I think for me, I'm all about preservation. I want to see us try to save as much history as possible, before it's all, and repurpose the space so we can use it for other things. Is the hope and goal.
You mentioned this already a little bit as you've been talking, but what are some of the most difficult parts about your job besides educating people? You're talking about trying to preserve some of these buildings.
Yeah.
What is the hardest part about doing that?
It's getting out there. It's continuous awareness, which is why I'm so big on social media. Like, follow our social media sites, like ours. It costs you nothing, and you will learn about history. You'll learn it by default because, as you can tell right now, everywhere I walk, every place and every space has history. Just imagine driving in a car, right? I mean, it's we're like talking about everything around us. It's nonstop, and I think a lot of that is the way that I associate with history is I just close my eyes and I look at a street or I look at a part of Houston and I immediately start thinking about everything I've learned over the last, 4 decades of information, right? So like I'm just absorbing content and I'm putting it out there. So I just think that, and the fun little posts that we do, I'll just be having 2 hours to kill before I do a TV segment on Channel 11. I've got a weekly radio show on 90.1 FM called the Houston Hour with Mr. McKinney and Heidi Vaughn. It's all about Houston history. So we always have a Houston history guest and we have a Houston arts guest. So my passion is arts, my background is arts, obviously, and then the history side of it too. So you get that kind of fun content as you're listening to our radio show on 90.1 FM, which is the radio, it's free. And that's my big theme. It's all about, I'm on the board of Miller Outdoor Theater. We've been doing free since 1923. Free productions over at Miller is what Houston Cinema Theater is known for. And I want to be the same way when it comes to the bus. I want people to associate that and not associate free with cheap, because that's not what it is. You're getting quality content. You're just not having to pay for it. And it's only free when you like our page. We charge $39.95 a person for all of our tours. That's market rate for tours in San Antonio, Dallas, Austin, including my competencies. We all charge the same price. So, but we don't want your money, we want your likes, because we're a nonprofit structure. So we'd rather have people like our social media sites and jump on the bus for free.
And how did you go about making it a nonprofit?
Yeah, that was important to me. And I think a lot of it is, it's not a business. I do real estate and I do speaking engagements mostly to subsidize my income. That along with the real estate allows me to live comfortably and to be able to make it free. The bus itself needs to operate free because we want to make it as accessible as many people as possible. And I think somebody would much rather contribute a couple $100 to pay for the gas and the driver and make it free to the public. So that to me, that's a better way to do it though. Because and I don't want to be a business. I don't want to operate the bus as a business, Monday through Friday or on the weekends. And that shocks people because they're almost like, you mean you're not open? It's like, no, whenever you have 20 people, we'll go out. And to me, that works out better because then you get to pick what time. Tuesday at 10 a.m., we'll do it. Friday happy hour, we'll do it. Saturday afternoon, great. When you've got 20 people, we'll go out. So get those 20 people lined up so that we can take the bus out.
So you said happy hour, you mean like how many people get buzz in there?
I know. I hope not. But if you do, whatever you do before you get on board the bus doesn't bother me. But if you do, I think it makes my tours fun. So it's up to you. It's a free country. So
Before you get on the bus, huh?
do what you got to do beforehand.
And you covered this just a little bit right now with your answer. You talked about how you subsidize your income with other sources of income because
But they're history related.
Yeah.
Speaking engagements are what I get paid to do mostly. I speak at 9 retirement homes on a monthly basis. So going in the retirement communities and talking about Houston history not only keeps them fresh, we're remembering old facts about Houston, but it also keeps me fresh. So if you're someone who does this on a full-time basis, this is all I do, and you're constantly lecturing on Houston history and different topics, and you're constantly learning. So I'm interviewing people all the time, right? On the radio show and just in general, older Houstonians learning about what life was like when they were growing up here. That's helping me to continue to grow and evolve because nobody knows everything about Houston history. And I preface all of my lectures when I do them at Rice University, when I do them in different places, I talk about Houston history as an expert in the field. Nobody knows everything about Houston history, including myself, because none of us were here 185 years ago when Houston was founded. And that's often a misconception. People think that, oh, I know everything. I don't know everything. I'm learning. We're all learning, And if someone gets real snippy, it's like, I don't know everything, but I might know more than you, And that's only because I've spent the time to research it. And that should be an asset in helping them. But I'm proving it can be done. Meaning you can make a living doing this, I drive a Toyota, I'm driving a Mercedes, and then, fancy. And so it's like, you can live within your means and you can do this professionally to where you can be an asset and benefit. And you can, so the Houston History Bus and Mr. McKinney's Historic Houston, the program that I started on January 22nd, 2002, that program is one of the greatest assets, and the bus is one of the greatest assets in Houston. Okay? It's an unknown, untapped resource that people are slowly starting to learn about. It's taken them 20 years. And that happens a lot. It takes some time to go, oh, wait a minute, And I want them to learn more about that. I want people to like our social media sites, share our posts, and learn about what we do because you'll have a good time doing it. And you will leave that experience understanding more about how great your city is. We do this a lot in neighborhoods, like we do a 5th Ward tour, for example, 3rd Ward tour, 2nd Ward tour. We cover all the wards in detail. But when we can do a tour like that, let me take the 5th Ward, for example, because 5th Ward has been, in the old days, it was called the Bloody Fifth, and there were all these, negative associations with the Fifth Ward, and Kathy Payton with the Fifth Ward CRC from the Fifth Ward has really worked hard to elevate the community and do great things in the area by redeveloping areas and also just continuously pumping in great programming in what they do. But when I can get young people of that neighborhood on board the bus to see how great their neighborhood used to be and or is becoming because of all the redevelopment, they start to get excited. And I think if we know more about our neighborhood, we're less likely to spray paint old buildings or spray paint, junk it up basically, right? Because we're like, oh man, so-and-so, that's Barbara Jordan's law office, and that's where Mickey Leland grew up. And they start to kind of think about some of these famous people that have shaped the city and the state. They're like, oh man, like that's kind of cool. So that's important to educate as many people as possible about what used to be there and how great their neighborhood was and can be, and in some cases, in most cases in Houston, is becoming. Good question. All of my tours last about an hour long. I think an hour is a perfect amount of time. I get tired after people after an hour, they get tired of me. It's like a win-win kind of thing. And if somebody wants to book the bus for 2 hours, it's twice the price. And they just book the bus for 2 hours. It happens all the time. People say, we love what you do. We want 2 hours of content, or they want me to pick them up from their house. Oh, I live over here. I'm like, that's fine. But you live in Sugar Land. And that's going to be, and the bus only goes like 45 miles an hour. And we go real slow when we're touring a neighborhood. So you're telling me that's an hour, and that's two and a half hours. We'll do it. We're going to charge you 2.5 times the price. Wait, because we go slow. Yeah, we're safe. Yeah. We've got to take side streets to get from A to B. So, and it's but we do a Sugar Land tour in detail. We do a Woodlands tour. We do a Katy tour. We do a Heights tour. We do a Woodland Heights tour. I mean, we do it all. Every place and every space has history. Every place. There's history on the ground we're on right now. I mean, and it goes beyond 1929 when the building was built. It goes way back to, and even before 1836 when Houston was founded, when White Oaks Bayou and Buffalo Meats Bayou, Allen's Landing across the street, right? So there's so much history. I mean, so it's all over. We do a Galveston tour. You have to pay for drive time though, which means that's, on a bus that only goes 45 miles an hour, it's an hour and a half for me to get, it's an hour for you to get to Galveston. It's an hour and a half for me there, an hour and a half back. It's 3 hour drive time plus an hour long tour. I mean, so we'll do anything anybody, and that's happened to me twice. People have said, I have no problem. Here's the credit card, charge it. So we'll do it. But we're just realistic. It's like, this is what it costs.
So are those, when you do those tours, are those like somebody contracts you like outside of like the free tours that you do? Those are tours that somebody has to reach out to you and be like, hey, this is what I want to do. Are you willing to do it? How much is it?
And the money goes to pay for free tours for classroom for school kids. You see, so we only charge people on the free bus when they want to do a private tour. So you're asking me to go outside of the scope of what we do. This is the business side of things. This is how we make the nonprofit work financially. Having a business model is we do private tours where people pay to go on board the bus, and that subsidizes the free classroom tours. I've got 112 HISD classrooms on a waiting list, and they all want to get on board the bus. So I have to find sponsors for each of them. And $300 sponsors a classroom of 30 kids. That's it. So it's like, it's $10. It does cost, and the $300 goes with the gas, the driver, the commercial insurance, the storage, the maintenance of the bus. I don't get paid. So like, that's where it goes. It goes to fund that, which is pretty nominal. I've got some sponsors who are like, here's 10 classrooms. Here's $2,000. I want to help the kids. Like, sure, thank you. So we don't want to charge them. We don't want to charge anybody. But we have expenses. And I mean, now with gas prices going up, because everything's going, diesel going up, and then just maintaining a bus, it's a lot of work. It's a very safe bus. We take it seriously. So we spend a lot keeping the bus maintained, and I've got 3 great mechanics that work on the bus on a regular basis. They're all work, lots of great focus on that.
And how would somebody go about scheduling one of those tours with you if they were interested?
The number one way to get a hold of me, and it's a public knowledge, again, I'm on TV, I'm on the radio, I've been doing this since 2008 professionally on TV, is my cell phone. Just text me, 713-364-8674, 713-364-8674. It's on my business card. You can Google Mr. McKinney, cell phone pops up. It's on the Facebook page. That's the easiest way, because in the business that we do, like, you want to have direct communication with me, because I'm the one who decides whether I'm going to be available to do it. And once you text me, we're going to set up a conference. Like, let me call you. You're texting me because I'm always in the studio, whether it's the recording studio or the radio studio, the TV station. So I'm on a bus, right? So I can't always talk. But if you text me, and email's fine, but email gets lost sometimes. And whereas you're asking me the same thing, I want to get on board the bus. How do we do it? And I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions, but I'm going to probably call you. I like to talk to people, old school. I want to talk to you on the phone because questions equal more questions. And although we do charge a price for private tours, we don't make our we're not based upon that. So I can discount the fees we always discount the fees. We charge a market rate, but not everybody pays that. It depends on the situation. If you're a student group, I'm going to make it work for it though. I'm going to say, hey, then you need to get us 40 likes. If you give me 40 likes on board social media, I'll do it for $1 a person, whatever, that's $20. So it's like it's not about the money. It should never be about the money in education. I think it's a challenge. Obviously, systems are created to where they have to pay the bills and pay the professors and keep the lights on and pay the janitors and pay everything that goes in. So I get that. But in my world, I try to make education as free and accessible as possible to as many people as possible. And that's the and like everybody else, there's always scholarships out there. So for us, it's just communication. What's the situation? What are you hoping to accomplish? And it's backfired. I've done a couple of, freebies for people that were like, it's just horrible. Not on me, on them, like, oh, I won't name any names. There was a lady out of Dallas, and she told me that her, sister got murdered, and they were doing this fundraiser. And I know, and I felt bad about the whole thing. And then the day of the tour, it was just her and her family. And I was like, I gave you the bus so you could, for free, so you could sell the seats out and raise money for this funeral service. And I was totally scammed. She just wanted a free tour with her family from Dallas. I know. So I learned. So I'm going to call you. I'm going to talk to you basically. I'm going to have a conversation with the person and make sure that what do they want to accomplish for that afternoon, and just all that great stuff. So yeah, don't be offended if you text me like, hey, let's set up a conference call, but texting me allows me to at least put you in the queue. So I recognize the number and so I can come to it. So I'm all about texting is the easy way to get hold of me. I'm a nice guy. I'm very nice. So, I'm not going to ever be rude about anything. So we'll have a conversation. It'll be fun. So you can learn about how to best make your experience what you're hoping to make it be.
And you covered this a little bit just now, but what does your typical day look like? I know you travel around everywhere because you do these conversations, but what does it break it down? How does it look like for you every single day from the moment you wake up to before you?
Yeah, I'm an early riser. I get up around 6 o'clock in the morning when the sun comes up, wakes me up, and then I try to go to bed like around 9 or 10. You got to get sleep, folks. And I know we're talking mostly young people out there. You got to get sleep. Your body has to repair itself. Obviously, as you get older, you need more sleep, but even at your early age, you just need sleep. The brain is like a cell phone. It has to restart itself, reboot like a computer, literally. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing. And then when we don't sleep, we overcompensate, we overeat, we overstress, and all these things happen, and they can totally be remedied if we just get 8 to 9 hours of sleep, a good 8 hours minimum, and that's so important. And that also, for what I do, in regards to memory and reciting things, right? I mean, I don't use a script. I don't use notes on my tour. I don't like to do that because either you know the information, you don't know them. The professors out there watching understand that same concept. Like you have to know your content, not only because you're going to be asked questions about it in detail. You have to know, and you have to also know when to say, I don't know the answer, but let me find out, because there's volumes and volumes of books, and there's also a newspaper, right? Which that's also how I learned a lot too at the library, reading old newspapers. And literally reading the old newspapers, the old Houston Post-Dispatch and the old, Houston Press newspaper, and even the Chronicle, reading every single day. And if you read, and the newspapers in those days had more money because they had more advertisers, because it was the source. So they had more pages, and they had more pages mean more content. So they're covering and documenting the city's past. And this is also why people need, I know I'm talking, like I said, to a younger generation here, that likes to get their information on their phones, and or maybe they subscribe to the Chronicle only on the online source. But you know what? We got to really understand the value of archives and records, and a digital record is very different than a printed record that someone can go there and physically research if they need to. So a lot of what I do is based on those articles and learning about the city's past. And the digital thing kind of scares me because that's not forever, and neither is print. Things fade. But to be able to have a physical, tangible copy of something, and also too, if it's a smaller amount of space in a newspaper, the information is going to be probably stronger vetted, right? They're going to go out there and make sure that stuff that's being put in print is going to be accurate as much as possible. And I think that's what you get to. Whereas online, you can just quickly on a deadline, put that online, and also you can go back and always edit it online. So there's less pressure to get the facts straight sometimes. It's about getting the story out quicker, and that's not a good thing. Whereas in print, it better be right in print, or you better print retraction or correction, right? So those are things that we learn about when we do archival research. We're out there with newspapers and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I just think that my basic day starts early in the morning, and I book all of my speaking engagements on purpose. And this is a good tip for people out there. If you're self-employed and you're doing this on your own, you want to have some free time. So what I typically do is book a lot of these speaking engagements the first 2 weeks of the month. And they're the ones that are calling me up, asking me to speak, right? As a performer, as an educator, so I can dictate my schedule. And I'm going to say, okay, if you want me to speak at your group and you want to pay me, it's going to have to be these weeks. And I do free speaking engagements for like groups like this, and then also for Rotary clubs. I'm a big Rotarian, so I'm anything. But I make them do the obvious. You need to give me 20 likes. And why do I do that? Why do I have a group? If they're asking me to speak, they really should know who I am and what I do as a performer, right? And as an educator. And if they don't have any concept, and I know I'm talking more of my friends who are performers out there right now tuning in, like if they have no concept of my body of work or what I've done the last 22 years, right? Then it's like, why would I want to come talk to them anyway? You want an audience to know what you do a little bit. They don't know everything. I'm there to tell them everything, but they should know a little bit about it beyond reading a bio. And so many organizations out there, and this is all pre-COVID, right? They just want a speaker. It's a speaking person who just wants to get a speaker book because they're nervous because they got to get once a month or once a week. And that's kind of offensive when they're just asking me to speak because they don't know who I want to do. They want to fill a slot. It's like, I'm not interested in speaking that. So I do my research too. And you guys out there too, know your value, know what you bring to the table, and know if you are really good at what you do and you're an expert in your field, people should at the very least, if they can't afford to pay you to come speak, they should respect what you do. And they should also promote what you do, meaning that as a speaker, I'm going to make sure there's a marketing plan. I'm going to look at your social media and see how many followers you have. I'm also going to look at your posts and make sure they're actually getting real engagements. This isn't just a bunch of fake bot followers. And if you're asking me to waive a $600 speaking fee or a $300 nonprofit speaking fee, I expect there to be some kind of marketing involved where you're going to promote what I do in a way that's going to bring me a couple of new followers. And that's not a lot to ask too. So the reason why I ask you at least have 20 followers, new likes, new followers, is so that at least the audience in the room that's going to be there because they have to be at that meeting at least knows what I do. So speaking engagements the first 2 weeks of the month. The second 2 weeks are reserved for little fun trips around Texas if I need to do some research, or just off time that I can focus. And then the bus is sprinkled in between, meaning that all of a sudden if someone's like, well, my husband's anniversary or my husband's birthday is on this day, I'll have to go out this weekend. Okay, fine, we'll go out that weekend. But as the world gets back to normal, as I start doing more and more things, I start to have more and more speaking engagements and commitments or bus tours that we're going to be offering. And obviously on the bus, it's weather permitting, so it doesn't get as busy in June and July, things like that. But that's a typical day. It's full. It really is. And then sprinkled in, I was the host. I still am the host for HTV City Pulse. I say was because I did it for 2 years and then we broke because of COVID, and then we're bringing it back. We haven't brought it back yet. But it was a weekly show on Thursdays. We would record the show on Thursdays and it would air on Fridays on HTV Comcast 16. And that was a weekly segment. And then on Channel 11's Great Day Houston every other week before COVID at the time. And then the weekly radio show on Tuesday at noon. So that keeps me busy. Yeah, so it's just nonstop. And I hire interns. I've got lots of interns that I work and I pay them a fair salary, fair rate. And I'm always looking for folks. If you're interested in video production, if you're interested in learning about history, there are paid opportunities out there through Mr. McKinney's Historic Houston, where we want to have young people help in this research process, and they'll learn about the city's past, just like I do. So.
There was actually one question that I was going to ask you that somebody asked on the chat. Are there any opportunities to learn and to volunteer and learn more about these resources?
Absolutely, yeah. If you're someone who's focused, if you want to go into education, for example, obviously we teach Texas history in 4th and 7th grade by state law. So 4th and 7th grade teachers are going to have a Texas history background and/or want to learn about that. If you just want to learn about U.S. history, a lot of Houston had a lot of important milestones in changing the shape of U.S. history. Okay, and we talk about that, and it's not just 19th century history, also 20th and even 21st century history. Texas in general and Houston is on the forefront of a lot of these innovations. So you will learn about that. And the answer is yeah. The best way, if you're interested in that, you can text me. 713-364-8674, or send me an email, mrmckinney@gmail.com. First name is Mr. like Mr. Rogers, last name is McKinney, okay, McKinney, not MR period, okay, and it's mrmckinney.com. There's a big difference. You'll go to the wrong site if you do the wrong way. But yeah, if you're interested in that, send me a message and reference the UHD program today. That's super important. No context. Hey, I'm a student. I heard you speak. Interested in helping you out. Interested in, you can do the volunteer stuff, which is relaxed, or you can focus on the paid stuff that we do, or you can start out as a volunteer and then go into the paid stuff. So just we can chat, because I do need help. I need help all the time as research assistants and then as video production assistants. And some of y'all out there now, especially awesome young people of a certain generation, you guys grew up with these things. You guys grew up with these phones in a way where you can film and video things that I can do, but I can't do it because I'm in front of the camera. So I need somebody behind the camera. And we've got drones, we've got other things that we use at Mr. McKinney's Historic Houston. We are typically documenting historical things before they get torn down. So we're on demolition sites. Right now, I'm focusing on a bunch of old churches in Houston, because a lot of these old churches are being torn down because the congregations are getting smaller and smaller, because young people are not necessarily as involved in organized religion. They're either practicing in their own ways, or they're not necessarily interested in the structure of organized religion. So these congregations are shrinking. And when they shrink and they eventually die out, their property is prime, and it was all been tax-free, and now it's for sale. So someone's going to get paid by selling it. And sometimes they don't want to keep the historical church on property. So the developer will level the church. Well, I like to get some good drone shots and get some good footage of the church before it's gone. And churches paint a really important picture of a neighborhood, even old Jewish synagogues that are gone, because a lot of times for Shabbat, the community doesn't drive, and even back then they didn't drive, because back in 19 teens and 20s, but they would walk to church or walk to temple. So if there's a temple there had to have been a Jewish community there, right? In walking distance to be able to live there. So, and a lot of those houses are gone. So we look at houses of worship, we look at old commercial buildings to simply paint a picture of what used to be in a neighborhood.
And how long are your internships typically? Like,
Good.
is it an unlimited amount of time if you want to keep interning, or do you set it?
It's so important to get to know an individual when they want to work with me, volunteer with me, be on the staff, to get to know what are their long-term goals. And if it's just, look, I want to go into accounting, but I love Houston history and I just want to learn about Houston history, great, hang around. If it's like, I want to be a Texas history teacher, okay, great. Now we'll focus a little more on that, but it just gets to know what you want to do. And it can be, I just want to learn, have a good time. And we do that kind of stuff beyond just that, And I'm the only one who does it. There's only 2 people in Houston that do what I do. There's Stephen Fox at Rice University, and there's Mr. McKinney. We're the only ones that focus in detail on the built environment, lecturing and teaching about it on a regular basis. And we've been doing it for a long time. And we're the ones that, and he's amazing. He's like my hero. He's the one that I look up to. And there's people like that I've learned from over the decades. And they're so kind. They're willing to help out. And that's also where I've learned to be kind. I mean, I've always been a kind person, but you really are aware of the knowledge that has been passed down to you. And then as you get to a certain age, you're like, man, I better hurry to start passing on to other people too, in their 20s, because otherwise it's going to be gone, and it's going to be gone because Houston keeps changing.
I have 2 questions.
Sure.
One, somebody asked, what movie or TV show do you think has depicted Houston the most inaccurate and accurate?
So I can't really think of a show that has cops, nobody. Has focused, Dallas had Dallas, the TV show, which glorified the late 70s, 80s, oil wealthy scene. We haven't necessarily had shows that have been, or even songs or movies. We have movies that are filmed here in Houston, but very few that are about Houston itself. And, Paul 13 had scenes and focus on that too. You've got Brewster McCloud, which took place in the Astrodome and has a lot of great shots of Houston back in the 1970s. So you have those type of movies that exist, but nothing really focused on telling the story. And I think there should be. I think a lot of that is Houston does not do a good job of tooting its own horn. Houston doesn't brag about itself. We're too busy to brag. We're way too busy moving forward and getting stuff done. Talk about how great we are. We'll let other people do that, and typically they don't, because they're too busy too. They're too busy caring about their own cities, right? And what they're doing is they're trying to save their city by talking about how great it is so you can move here. Where are they moving from? They're moving from Houston, because people are to Houston, right? And Houston's the best kept secret. It's the best. It's great cost. And I tell this to young people too, the cost of living here is affordable. Even the cost of renting, and hopefully you're at home with your folks as long as they'll let you, because that's when you save money and you put money towards things that are important, in your life now. If you've got a roof over your head sponsored by and my mom's from Mexico, and we do things differently, obviously, in the culture. My grandma was 92 years old, lives with my mom, and she's not too far. Her house is not too far from my house, so we're close. But yeah, you kind of keep it here, right? Save your money. And if you had to rent, it's going to be cheaper in Houston. If you got to have a car here, it's going to be cheaper to drive in Houston with the gas prices, because it's high, but it's higher other places. The food scene is very vibrant here. And even the ethnic communities that are here have grocery stores and have food places that are in the area. Well, they're also used to paying a lower price for things, and they do things thriftily. So it's just a great city to be in. It's the best kept secret, and I've traveled all over, and I've lived in other cities, and Houston's always a place you want to come back to for that reason.
If you wanted someone to learn about Houston who doesn't live here, what book/movie/show would you recommend they watch or read?
Yeah, there isn't a lot of online content. I thought about it. Maybe people out there, young people out there, can help me create some online content. I have the knowledge, and a lot of it is writing a script and putting it on paper, because I'm a real big believer in that. I wing a lot of things on my social media, my Instagram stories. I'll just be, like I said, I'll have an hour to kill at like a coffee shop, and I'm like, wait a minute, this coffee shop is historic, the neighborhood. And someone will put the camera on, and we'll just talk for 5 minutes or 10 minutes about the neighborhood while I'm waiting for a meeting to show up. So that's an example, but real good content. If people are listening out there, we should create some content about, well, not so much a documentary, small videos, 10-minute videos about neighborhoods of Houston. A lot of it is just, it's writing the script, it's writing it out, and then it's shooting it, and then it's editing it. And I typically do things in one take, because that's my theater background. I want to get up on stage, get it done, do it. So I don't really like to edit, only because it's a lot of work. And there's some people listening right now that are young that like, oh, we love to edit. And editing is fun. Editing is like painting a picture, right? You've got your materials, you're creating something. So I like to edit at times, but I know that if I were to produce a bunch of videos, I would have to edit them all, and that overwhelms me to where I don't do them, which is why the online content is not there yet. But there isn't a lot of online content for Houston history. It's done well. I have seen some book reports and some things that are done by young people for college credit or high school credit, and those particular mini videos online are not bad. They're good, not great. And I don't know if a lot of that content, actually I do know not all the content is always accurate, because they're getting it from things like Wikipedia and sources that are wonderful for like fast information, but not necessarily for something detailed, because they're not going to give you the full story, right? So there's a call right there. There's a call to action for people out there that love to make videos. And a lot of those images that you'd be using about Houston's past are available at these libraries that would show people black and white photos of what used to be there. So the opportunity is out there if someone's interested in partnering up and working together with Mr. McKinney's Historic Houston to create some video content.
This is a question that I have, because I had a homegirl whose mom was actually in the movie Urban Cowboy. And they said that they filmed that near Pasadena, near around there. And she took me there, and I was like, oh wait, this is it. So I know this is kind of
the building's gone. Yeah.
I mean, it's nice to learn about because it's stuff I find this interesting because I love Houston culture. I love everything about Houston and stuff like that. So it's just listening to all this is just basically an eye opener, because I've heard a lot of history about this school, but I was like, oh, I don't know that much, and I don't know who to go to about this. So it's nice to learn about all the situations. I don't even know a bunch of stuff happened around here, but that's the only history I know.
Yeah, I did a segment on Channel 11 called Houston on Location, and I'm really sad because when Tegna bought out Velo, all of our video archives were gone off the archive. So very few of these videos exist, but there's 72 plus movies that were filmed here in Houston. Urban Cowboys, one in 1983, and they're kind of all throughout. It was filmed in 8 years. But they're all throughout, and there's lots of locations that were used for those movies. People use locations for movies that you don't even know it's Houston. They don't say it's Houston the movie. They just need a downtown scene, and it's cheaper to block the streets off in Houston than it is to block them off in New York, right? But they just need those big tall buildings to be in the background to make it look like it's a urban city. And the great thing about Texas, and why the governor's been really helpful at getting people to do film here, is because of our tax credits and our incentives for the film industry, but also the topography of Texas. and we all learn this in geography, right? And in Texas history, that, you know, in Houston, if you're in Houston and downtown Houston, you can film a downtown scene. Then if you drive 50 miles / 45 minutes southeast of here, you're now at the beach. You can do a beach scene in Galveston. You drive an hour up north, you're now in the woods, the piney woods, you know, of Texas. You go all the way out, you know, 2.5 hours west, you're now in the hill country. You drive out 8 hours west, you're now out in El Paso.
Yeah.
So you're out like in the desert. So the Texas topography is really special for filming because you can keep it in one state, you can travel relatively closely, and you can make a movie and do it from different angles and different storylines. So I think that's what makes Texas rather, such an incentive to come here. So we've been blessed to have lots of movies that are filmed here, and it answers your earlier question, but why don't people know that? Because they're not supposed to know that. It's not supposed to be El Paso. It's not supposed to be, you know, cute. It's supposed to be a city, a desert, right? And that's what makes it, you know, valuable to a film company. But we benefit because they hire a lot of our crew and our team here. It's cheaper to hire a local staff than it is to hire somebody out of state and fly them in and house them and things like that. So, yeah, absolutely.
If you could, you want to ask questions?
I was gonna say, can we ask questions?
Yeah, go ahead. ask
Oh,
questions.
so what are your thoughts on how, like, so the historic?
So where have you been?
Getting food.
You just showed up? Okay, I was like, no. Really the impressive is like, I was in the Zoom call. I was one of the guys sitting watching you on home. I drove all the way over here to ask the question.
That was me,
Yeah.
actually. I went to go get food too. I
You got on
was
Zoom with
writing the questions.
I was gonna look at you. That matters. That
So my
matters.
question
Yes,
is,
sir.
What are your thoughts on, like, so you know, on River Oaks Boulevard, the historic homes that are there, typically they get bought out, like the 1940s home or pre-war, post-war. the ones that
1920s
are
homes.
cedar
Yeah,
style.
yeah.
And what happens is they get bought out by these building people, and there's not really a lot of like protection given by like the National Historic Register of Land, like land.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's more of just like a gentle saying, like, you know, don't tear the house down, but like, there really isn't much, there really isn't much protection available for, you know, historic buildings. And so what happens is that-
There is actually, but they're not being applied. Let me give you an example of that. There's 22 historical districts in Houston. There's 2 different types of designations you can get on your historical structure. If you own a house or a building, you can have a Houston landmark status on your building, which just means it's a landmark. It means that it can be torn down. The protected landmark status means the building can't be torn down. And there are loopholes, because some people say, oh, yes, it can. The loophole, I shouldn't say this loophole because people exploit it, but like if a building is in such disrepair that it is a damage, a health risk to the public, or it's just not safe from a structural standpoint, then you can tear it down. And what do developers do that want to get around that? They just don't fix the roof, right? Then it deteriorates over time, and they say, "Oh, look, it's deteriorated." So that's a big no-no. But the answer is you can't. But in theory, if you make your house a protected landmark house, it can't be torn down. So the challenge of River Oaks is it's not one of those. It's 1924, founded by the Hogg brothers, Will Hogg, Mike Hogg, and Hugh Potter, 1924, as Country Club Estates. It is wealthy. These are all second homes for the wealthy when they're first founded. And you're right, a lot of new money or younger people that are coming in that are making a lot of money don't care about the history. Now, some of them do. They'll look at an old mansion, like, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. This is, you know, we got to keep it. And they'll keep it and they'll put a bunch of money into fixing it up. And that's really special because when you can take a 1920s, 1930s home and you can put brand new LEED certified windows in there and brand new, flex pipe versus old fashioned cast iron copper pipe. So when you can put money in the infrastructure of a 1920s home, you're now saving that home for another 100 years. That's the good thing about that. And those folks in River Oaks have plenty of money, and they're smart enough for quality. They're not going to put cheap windows on a home. They're going to put windows that are going to give them good energy efficiency and last, right? So those are good things. And but yeah, I see them being torn down every single day. And I'm like, and what really hurts me is I'm like, oh my gosh, that was so-and-so's house. And if they just would have known that so-and-so, like, let's say they're a young tech startup kind of guy. When I say young in River Oaks, I mean like 40 years old. That's young in River Oaks, right? Yeah, River Oaks is like, you're young when you're 40 and 50 living in River Oaks. But what's happening is they're tearing down a house. And I'm like, the person you just tore that house, that guy invented something that you're benefiting from. You made your millions off that guy's invention or that guy's company, oil company, energy company, that you had no idea. So I'm there to connect the dots. I'm just there too little too late because there's only one of me. What we need young people listening right now to do that are willing to volunteer for this, and why I say volunteer versus getting paid, we could probably pay you, but it's probably gonna better volunteer because I need like 30 people to do this. They're called architectural surveys. We mentioned the old churches, for example. Okay, a lot of people live in the East End. A lot of people live in the near North Side. Those are where a lot of the areas are starting to transition. Good or bad, it's called gentrification. Good or bad, they're changing. What's happening is the neighborhood is changing and it's being torn down and demolished by default. So we have to do an architectural survey and take photos and document all those buildings. Well, there's only one of me and I can't do it all. And that's also why I haven't done it all. It's too overwhelming. It's like, I don't know. You know, what I can do is a bunch of free bus tours, maybe for a birthday party, or like a bunch of pizza and a bunch of food or drinks or whatever, and we can have a good time. And I can do things like that to say thank you, only because you're going to need an army of people to blanket a neighborhood, right? And you divide and subconquer an entire neighborhood by documenting the homes. And that's important. What's sad is the wealthier parts of Houston, like Tanglewood or Bronx, are actually being demolished quicker. It is the older homes and some of these older neighborhoods I mentioned earlier, like in the East End, and also, well, but by default, they're preserved. Why are they preserved in like third ward, fifth ward, second ward areas? Why are they preserved? Because the people that live there have lived there forever. And they bought the houses from somebody who originally owned the house. And there's a lot of sense of pride. And they're thrifty and they're handy. So they're taking care of these older, they're stretching out the life of that home. Whereas, and they don't have the money to build a new house. They're not going to build a new house, or they're savvy. My mom's from Mexico. She's not going to build a new house. She's going to fix it up. She's going to put a Band-Aid on as much as she can, and squeeze as much as she
Put
can
some
out of
duct
it.
tape on that window.
Duct tape,
Keep it shut.
whatever.
If they do rebuild it, they rebuild it section by section.
Yeah.
So you can't even notice when it like, by the time it's done, you're like, when did that
Yeah.
happen?
I think the only chance they'll do is the locks. That's
You know,
it.
and there's nothing wrong with that, but what that's so these neighborhoods have been preserved by default because the value is maintained steady to where there's no need for new people to come in and build new houses there, which means their house is going to be torn down, which is good. So those neighborhoods are kind of okay for now. I'm worried about the parts of Houston that are going to be gone in 20 or 30 years from now. And my tours they'll be more valuable now because now you're really going to see what used to be there. All of my tours I mentioned are about old black and white photos of Houston's past. So we're going to be driving around a neighborhood or downtown Houston. I'm going to show you what used to be on that property with the photo, and I'm going to show you what's there now. Okay, and that's what makes our tour special. There's plenty of walking tours out there, but they can't walk around with a bunch of foam boards. They can't do the tour like that. They can try to walk around with an iPad, but the glare of the iPad, it doesn't work, you know. And it's just, so when you're on a bus and the photo is 24 by 36 poster size blown up, you're like, oh, and plus then you're right there. A lot of times, as you mentioned earlier, like they'll fix a house, they'll put something on a house, right? So you'll be able to tell kind of the original house and all the additions that were added onto it. The building is there and all the additions. And when I show you an old photo of the building, oh, there's the old building, it's there and everything's around it. So you can tell what used to be there with those then and now photos. And then and now, because of social media, is very popular, those then and now experiences, right? People look in black and white, they flip over the Instagram. So what's your name, sir? Robbie, you liking my Instagram page? You liking my Instagram page, Mr. McKinney's Historic Houston History Bus? Robbie, do it right now. Go on, you're doing it now. Robbie, you're killing me.
I have another question.
I'm gonna, it's one per ass, one per like. So, yeah, you young lady. Do you like my page, by the way? Anything at all? Instagram, Facebook? Oh my goodness. Do you have YouTube?
Yeah.
Go to YouTube. My YouTube channel only has like 200 people, I think, or like 50 people. It's pathetic. Which is why I don't do videos on YouTube. So yeah, Mr. McKinney's Historic Houston on YouTube. Mr. McKinney, and you just gotta subscribe. Hit the subscribe button, okay? Because now I have 101 subscribers.
One like equals one question. There you
That's
go.
all I care about. I only do because it costs you nothing, right? Robbie, hey, it doesn't bother me. It's less I gotta talk. It doesn't bother me at all, you know? And I won't be doing this forever. I think people need to understand that too. When it comes to the bus, I'm not going to be doing this forever. So enjoy the bus rides now. Learn from Mr. McKinney because I'm not going to be doing it forever. It's only going to be, you know, I may write books and I may do other stuff, but I won't do it forever. So that's why I think it's for the bus. Things that, you know, as you get, I'm not going to be like 90 years old in the bus, you know. So learn now because it's, you know, enjoy now.
Have you thought of like having somebody replace you or
That's
join
what
you?
these folks right here hopefully are doing. No, I really am. So I'm not someone who's like, you know, oh, I know everything and I want. So in the historical community, this is kind of sad. A lot of historians, you know, they're very possessive of Houston history and Texas history, because as an historian, they're kind of like archaeologists, right? They discovered that fact buried away someplace in an article, a newspaper. And because they spent hours in the library, they've earned the right to talk about that fact. And they don't want to share it with somebody. They want you to kiss their butt and think they know everything, right? It's like, I'm not like that. I'm like, I want to share it. And I'm out there looking for the next person that can take on this opportunity, this mantle, right? Because the people that I'm learning from now, they're all in their 70s and 80s. And I'm not kidding you. Like, the youngest person that does what I do is probably me. And I'm that young. And that's sad. There's nobody in their 20s or 30s or 40s who wants to do this because there's no money in it. And that's also something else we got to help. We got to build a community up to where people that I have mentored in this, I'm like, they need to pay you to speak. Are you going to be speaking at their event? They need to pay you, $100, $50, something, because you're valuable as an historian. So they need to pay you for an article. And like Robbie a second ago, like they might be like, well, I'll just do it. It's like, then great, go out there and get another person who knows about it. Just try to find somebody else. It used to bother me, 15, 20 years ago. Now it doesn't bother me. I'm like, you know what? Go do it. And 9 times out of 10, that lady calls back. It's like, okay, who do I make the check out to? And it's like, you make it out, so it's like, if you're good at what you do and you put a value on it, people will have no choice but to pay you for it. And they're not really paying me, they're paying the foundation, because I'd rather than pay them when it comes to the speaking engagements that are like for charity. I'd rather raise the money for the bus, because we always need something new. I need, new seats for the bus. The bus needs to be painted. There's new tires. I mean, there's always something you can have new on the bus that we'd love to have. So, but know your value, know your worth, and don't be afraid to say, this is what we charge. And if they say no, then it's fine. Thank you so much. They'll come back. They'll come back, especially if you're good at what you do. They have no choice. And if not, no big deal, doesn't bother me.
We have one more question
Sure.
from the chat. The question is, we know historians study the past, but what do you think is on the horizon for Houston in terms of the next major industry to shape the area?
Okay, and that's interesting. Obviously, we're focusing more on innovation now. The mayor wants to focus on innovation. Rice University has doubled down with the Ion Center. So I think that we'll see places like that. Are we going to beat Austin and Silicon Valley with those kind of things? Maybe not. I hope so. I think we all hope so. I think what Houston does well, we do a lot of things well. And maybe we just focus on those things that we do well, and we just get better at those. Versus trying to do things that other people do. Yeah. And I know it sounds bad because everyone wants to be the next best thing, but it's like, we're good. Yeah. Let's just focus on that, and let's just make that good. But what I focus on is the built environment. So where are the new hotspots of Houston? It's going to obviously become denser and denser in the inner core, which is scary for someone like me, which means what's going to happen is, and scary for folks of low income areas, because that's what's going to be redeveloped quicker, because it's cheaper, and that little old lady doesn't know what she has, and she can sign over here with her glaucoma on the dotted line, right? She can't see. I mean, here we are. I mean, but it's true. People take advantage of those people, right? That's not right. So the city's going to change. The city's going to change. And that's what I worry about, is we're going to lose our history. So we got to start documenting it and make it into something, and we should learn from it. I mean, we can take areas of Houston and keep some parts of the neighborhood and then develop others, because if we don't do it, it's going to be gone. That's what I worry about. So yeah, that's the future. Development is the future, right? How are we going to build in certain areas? That's the future. And that's our growth patterns. And I think it's more in the inner core and the density. We also need to focus on mass transit. We don't do that well. We've got a horrible system of mass transit here in Houston. It's never really worked for Houston. And that's a problem too, because as you get denser and denser, if you don't have a way for people to get around, and I love the bike lanes that are coming on. People complain it's too hot in Houston. No, there's showers in different places. You can shower. It's fine. Wear a t-shirt in June. You'll be fine. And wring it out. I mean, it'll be fine. But it's like we should be using our bike lanes, and we should be making sidewalks that are more and more accessible. And we can decrease the lanes, 1 or 2 lanes of traffic to better our community where people can walk. Walking is healthy, walking is available. And I think that the denser we get, the more walking is going to make more and more sense. The more biking is going to make more and more sense. So those are healthy things that we should be doing anyway for our city. So that is how development is going to change the health of Houston. It's going to get more and more dense in the inner core, the inner downtown, midtown area, and it's going to get more and more denser in the inner loop area. And then it's going to be easier to walk and get around and bike and get around because it's not that far. Yes, ma'am, question.
when I was.
You like the YouTube?
Yes, yes. You didn't have
What's your
that
name?
many subscribers. Allison?
Allison, I'm gonna check this.
Recent follow subscribers.
No, but when I was little, like, there was this house by Beachma and Gaston.
Oh my gosh, the Gypsy House.
Yes, what's
Oh.
the history of the house?
That White House?
Yeah,
Dude, yeah, dude.
Right,
that-
oh.
the haunted one?
Yeah, that's
No, it was, I think it was built in 83 or 82, and the home itself on the corner, yeah, that's an example. So there's a lot of story. I do a Sharpstown tour, 1955 to present day, Frank Sharp. And I go there sometimes if we have extra time on the tour because it's technically kind of in Sharpstown proper. But there's not much we know about the house, just the fact that it was built in the 80s and it was a home built by gypsies. They say that, and that's even a negative word. I really shouldn't say that. And that's also something about history too. And in history, there's a lot of old school terms that we use that we shouldn't be using, or we use them to simply describe things. People of Romania, I mean, I don't know. I should, travelers,
Yeah, they're like nomads.
so nomadic travelers. So, but there's some history there that I had on the file on it right now. So it's hard to go into that right now, but just know that there is some history. I've never heard that it's haunted. I think that's like an urban legend.
Yeah, I read on Reddit that supposedly the.
That's your first problem. No kidding. I got my history from Reddit.
I read that the house, like the reason it was built, so they just compete with the Sharpstown.
No, I think it was an eccentric person who because if you look at the houses that are next door to it, there are a series of these duplex townhouses that were created in the 1970s as well, early 80s. And it's just an example of the young professionals that were moving in at the time. Why? Because the gallery era 71 on was really booming. And the Sharpstown area and corridor was a cheaper place. Plus, this is 20 years after Sharpstown was founded in 1955. So those older housing stocks also become available. And these are homes that were built for the World War II GIs. So they're built with 1 bathroom, 3 bedrooms, bathroom in the hallway, 3 bedrooms. So they weren't really the right fit for people that could afford it in other nicer neighborhoods that were not close to the area, right? So yeah, I think it was just somebody trying to outdo their neighbors. But that's what I've heard too. And that's what makes sense by the houses that are all in the area. They're good homes, but that one just needed to be bigger and better. Plus you're on the corner. And I also think that it came out a little more as time went on and they gobbled up some right away. It got closer and closer to the corner because it's built very close to the easement, which is not typical for a house. Most people that build houses of that size and stature purposely build the house far away from the house. So you're driving up and you're impressed by the structure. When they build them that close, you can tell they don't really know what they're doing. Like they don't know what they're doing from an architectural standpoint, or home building standpoint. They're just building it to make a point, So
Somebody asked, what about the old spaghetti warehouse across the bayou?
yeah, the 1911 Riser building is haunted. I'm not going to talk about it. It's on Mr. McKinney's Haunted Houston tour that I only give the last two. Haunted Houston tour. Yeah, lots of great. We only do it. It's my least favorite tour to give. It's our second most popular, the tour I hate the most.
Oh, man.
I know. When people ask me why is that? As a noted historian that wants to be taken seriously, I've got to lower myself to haunted legends and lores, right? So for that reason.
But that does add to Houston's history because it affects the way people react and people
No,
interact with that area.
so my tour is a fact-based haunted Houston tour, and I launched this tour. I was on a date, and she got the tickets for the tour, so I didn't know where we were going, what we were doing. And it was this guy. And if you know about these haunted tours that are out there, and some of y'all probably listening probably have your own haunted tour company, you're walking around dressed up as Dracula. But that's what this guy was doing. He was dressed up as Dracula, and we were at the Rice Hotel, and he's like, "You see the Rice Hotel? This is where Sam Houston died." And I'm like, "No, he didn't. He died in Huntsville in 1863." So this guy was just making stuff up, and basically he's not an historian. He's not even a tour guide. He's just an actor, a young guy trying to make a buck, trying to sell $20 haunted Houston tickets, walking around telling ghost stories that he'd heard from somebody else. And I'm not going to mention her name. She'll remain nameless because she's kind of my idol until I found out the truth. And this is kind of how your heroes are not perfect, right? Because she was doing tours, for 40 years. And I finally, and we're very good friends. So I won't mention her name. We're very good friends. And I sat down with her about the haunted tours that she gave. They're very popular. And I was just like, so, because I do my own and mine are all fact-based, so I'm going to tell you why that building is haunted. We're going to talk about, based on newspaper clippings and articles, The people that died in the fire, for example, that building, why the two people that died in the newspaper match the description of the people that people have seen over the years, right? So we're connecting the dots. It's a fact-based haunted tour. Remember, the worst thing you can do as an educator is give out bad information, because you're populating a whole new generation with bad information. And if you know it's bad and you find out later on, clarify yourself. But sometimes we do it, we just don't know we're doing it. And that's why this tour has to be disclosed. They're about legends and lores. And why I don't like doing it, because these things, and I'll tell you on the tour, this is the part that was passed down. May or may not be true, but you got to decide for yourself. This is what's been passed down over the years. Okay. And I might even interject by saying, this is why I think it's factual, because these particular oral histories I've been given. That one person who I idolized was doing haunted tours for over 40 years in Houston. When I was having coffee with her and lunch with her and coffee with her, we sat talking to me. I was like, all these great stories. And typically tour guides want to give me information about their tour. Oh, you should talk about this, you should talk about that. I'm good. I know
myself.
Well, but also that's what you do. That's what you do.
Yeah.
That's what I do. And I appreciate it. And it's not, sometimes we do collaborate. We do talk back and forth and say, so, I heard about this. What do you think about that? I heard the same thing too, but I heard it this way. And so why don't you think of, and then I go live with them and we find out the facts are here and there. But when I was talking to her, man, like idolizing, oh my gosh, you're like the legend, like how did you like this haunted? Like, where'd you get that stuff? And she's like, I made it up. I just made it up. And I was like, oh, I looked up to you, and now like you made it up. And she goes, yeah. And I also found out why she did it for two reasons. One, she wanted to make her tours like, and that's why she's a tour guide. I'm not a tour guide. I'm an educator and an historian that happens to have a school bus. So I do things differently. I'll take you out on a bus ride if you have 20 people and you're nice to me. Like I have to like you, and I'm very serious. It's when I talk to you on the phone. If you don't want to learn about history, then I don't want you on the bus. That means you just want to be entertained. And it's like then go with the guy with the cape and the fangs, the vampire guy. He'll entertain you. You're not going to learn correctly, but he'll entertain you. But yeah, and she also told me, she also said that she made some of those stories up so that she could, and she's one of the ones that's very competitive. These are the old school historians, right? The ones that are in their 60s, 70s, 80s now. They're like, they think they own it, and everyone's forgotten about them because it's no longer the 90s. Everyone forgot about them to where like they want to be relevant, so they're very possessive, right? So what happened is she said that she also made some of this stuff up so she could test people when they copied her stories. So she would change the names and make up the names so that you couldn't research the article and find out who the person was. And so that when she went on someone else's tour, she could find out if they were like repeating what she said. And I was like, okay, that's kind of brilliant. That's kind of old school brilliant. It is, but at the same time, it's like, but I don't do that. Like, it's like, look, one thing you can't do is you can't copyright facts. You can't own facts, okay? As an artist, as a creator, create something different on your own. It's like that Prince thing that's in the article recently with the photographer. It's like, I get it, but like you should be able to create your own stuff. Go out there and find your own facts. They're out there. They're buried in the newspapers. They're buried in the city directories and the maps and the yearbooks. You'll find those facts are out there, and contribute, because when you're contributing new facts to a story, you're giving something new. Maybe your question?
Yeah, okay. You mentioned ghost tours. I don't know if you've been to Galveston.
Lots of history in Galveston.
And that's a ghost tour there. But one time we were doing a ghost tour there, and he was giving out the history of a building. It was a restaurant. People were eating outside, and he's like, "Oh, someone jumped from this building, and like their brains splattered everywhere." And the people stopped eating their pasta. And I was like, "Oh no, that's
Pasta, that's our first mistake. That's all our cars. That's scary. No, a lot of it, yeah, I get that. No, Galveston's very haunted. There are actual legitimate, total haunted sites in Galveston, and I've got a lot of great colleagues that have books on Galveston and do Galveston haunted tours. And I mean, Catherine Messia, for example, who I'll mention in Galveston, she's got 3 books on the Galveston ghosts and cemetery. She's really good, and she's more of a writer and historian turned tour guide. So her focus is on facts. So these are people that do it differently because they just have a stronger moral compass. Like we could not live with ourselves if some young person was out there repeating things that were inaccurate. We would just feel so horrible that we did something to a generation that, is now repeating these things. So yeah, I mean, and we do it sometimes on accident, but then we find it, we clarify, we apologize. Yes.
Question, do you have a book or like a pamphlet or something where, yeah, you share your.
I get that
knowledge?
all the time. I've been approached by 2 different publishers to say, you should write a book about Houston history. And I'm like, not so much interested. And the reason why is I am working on a children's book series.
Okay.
It takes Houston history, folks. It's a little more manageable. I just have to work on some artists. My illustrator passed away.
Oh.
So, but I'm looking for artists. And I'm even looking, a lot of these are untold stories. So if you're an artist out there interested, well, but you have to be interested in illustrating a children's book, which means we're talking about 60 images, which is a lot of images. And we're talking about different kind of partnership opportunities, meaning like, and I want to make sure you get paid as an artist. So there's 2 structures. One, you get paid up front for your images, or which means the images are property of the publishing company, or your 50-50 partnerships in a book. So those are all ideas. But children's books, that's more my market. My market's always been focused on kids. The other thing is all my friends have books. I have a lot of friends that are noted historians in their area. George Slaughter with Spring Branch history, Kimber Fountain with Galveston history. So there's different people that are out there with their different niches of history because they're passionate about those areas. And they're my friends, but the book margins are like $2 a book. And I'm like, $2 a book. And some of them even do the Amazon printing where they get like $6 a book. I get $40 a person for 1 hour. So it's like, the margins don't work out. And if I did books, I would probably be my best customer. I'd go out there and buy like 1,000 copies and give them free to people because I want them to have a free copy of the book. So I might even just self-publish a book. But I thought about it, but also too, as long as I'm doing this, it doesn't make sense to buy the book when you can get it. I'm cutting my own self. And I'm talking about the audio books and like, virtual tours I could do, or a pop-up on a map. Mr. McKinney goes, hey, guess where you're at right now? This is the 1925 building. I could do that, but I need help. I need people that are young and ambitious that want to help to build. Mr. McKinney's Historic Houston History Bus, because that's the way to do it, is to build that vehicle, the vehicle for what we're going to do, and I just happen to be attached to it because somebody has to be attached to it as the brand. But yeah, I need an army of people willing to help me do that and volunteer their time, knowing that there's a paid opportunity somewhere down the line, and or maybe if it's like an artist doing something like that, that's different, so. Yeah.
And speaking on the topic of books, are there any favorite authors or historian
Yeah,
authors?
I think that question was asked earlier. What kind of books? David McComm wrote a book about Houston in the early. None of these books are new. A lot of these books are old. They're books that were written in the 80s and 90s. So what's so interesting is that Houston has changed in 40 years. So it's like the book's kind of outdated, but it's got a lot of great history for that time period. So put yourself in the mindset of a 20, 30-year-old writing a book in the 1980s. It's something for Houston, and you're going to be good. But it's still facts about Houston's past. And in some cases, the newer books will omit that early part of history to get you more to the history in contemporary times, right? So they'll talk about the original narratives of Houston, 1836, when it was founded, and a couple of key players, and then they'll move along. So those books that were. So Ray Miller's Houston is kind of like a guy. That's one book that I would like to write, a newer, updated version of Ray Miller's Houston, Mr. McKinney's Historic Houston. That's one that's going to be out there eventually. Even as I get older, I want to do something, and that's because everybody keeps asking me for it. They want it in book form, and I'm like, okay, but I'm in no hurry to do it. It's a lot of work. Those people have written books. It's a lot of work to put it together. I'm just not interested in doing it right now, and I'll get there. We'll get there one day when I'm retired, and I'm like, okay, I'm sitting by the beach and just writing a book. That's easy to do.
And would it be a book or a series? Because there are different districts.
You can do different neighborhoods. No, I think that I'm going to leave that. I think what's best to do is a children's book series of different neighborhoods. Yeah. And the goal is to ignite the passion of a young person, even a teen adult reader, to like get ignited and then let them do their own research. Because I think a lot of that is how you get excited when you start exploring. And I don't want to take that away from somebody by giving it all away. But I think a children's book, and if I was going to write one, it's going to be very deep. It's going to be more geared to the parents and the kids. Versus, it's not going to be like a coloring book or like a, Joe goes to the old time grocery store. It's going to be more like, this is the 1915 grocery store that was founded by the Italian Sarabia family back in the day with This is their neighborhood because it used to be an Italian neighborhood. And now it's a Mexican neighborhood because of the 1910 migration. So we would talk about in those contexts to where it's a good sized children's book that has a lot of good information, but not going to overwhelm a kid. And the way you compensate that is through visuals, having really, really good visuals.
You ever remember, like, you ever seen those books when they were like, oh, who's this person, who this person is? You ever thought about like doing one of those, what is Houston, or like, I can't think of the name, but it's those books where like they have them big heads of them people. And,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
they're, like,
Who
the-
is? It's and who is like who is Albert Einstein?
Yeah.
No, but that's something else too. And that's not copyrighted. You could certainly do your own series based on who is so and so. Everything I do has the Mr. McKinney's name attached to it for a variety of reasons. The main reason why is for the haters. That's why. No, but we're laughing. But I'll tell you why. It's no, seriously, because if it's possessive, this is on the bus tour and in general, my PowerPoint presentations, which we didn't get a chance to get to.
Oh,
Lots of
boy.
great slides. Lots of great slides. They all are. But we didn't get it. But a lot of it is my version of historic Houston. This is what I am telling you because I get that a lot. It's called the G Smith. Oh, you didn't talk about that. You didn't talk about that, right? And you're like, man, calm down. Like this is Mr. McKinney's historic Houston. If you want your version of historic Houston, go. And I get that from the haters, like, well, you didn't mention. And it's like, like it's only an hour long. And if you want and I do know about XYZ, but they don't want to hear about that. It bores them. You want to hear about that because you're this. And as Houston's fabric of history continues to grow, there's new people we got to put in there, right? And we got to focus on these, even ethnic groups that start to come into a neighborhood and transition the neighborhood over time. So you just can't talk about the Germans and Italians. You got to talk about the Hispanic community that moved in there in certain areas. So we have to talk about a lot in a little bit of time. So I get that a lot. So it's Mr. McKinney's Historic Houston because it's my version of historic Houston. It's so all the books that I do, it's going to always be Mr. McKinney's so-and-so. Someone can't come back and be like, well, you didn't talk about this. And it's like, nobody cares what you think. It's my version of it, right? You write your own book, and I get that a lot. People just love to do that. It's like, and you just know that. And I'm nice about it. I'm being obviously funny and catty here because I'm amongst friends and because you guys are college young people of age and, and you want the jokes. But no, a lot of it is it's just like everything is Mr. McKinney's this and that. It's my version of that. And that should encourage you to go out there and do your own thing. Do your own thing. No one's going to stop you. Yeah.
Do you want to go through this one? Even if it's just.
I got 4
real quickly?
minutes. I've got a tour at 6 o'clock tonight on the other side of town. I got to go get the bus and meet my driver. No, it's fine. They're just old black and white photos of Houston. It's a whole presentation. These take place. It's
Instagram
fine.
has it.
Yeah,
Instagram is nice,
like our
man.
page. Yeah, you just and read the posts are long. They're long and meaty. A lot of information there. I haven't posted in a while on some sites that I have because we're still waiting to do that. And I don't have my social media intern that I used to have, and that was a lot of fun. We were posting on a regular basis, and it just things change. And I'm more active on Facebook and Instagram stories just because it's quicker. But yeah, we want to build. But like our page now, so you can like and follow what we do and join us on the bus for free. So. Yes.
I didn't follow.
Okay, yeah, you can ask me now. Yay.
Pay my dues. So is it true that Riverside Terrace is called the Jewish River Oaks because they weren't allowed to originally purchase homes in the book?
Yeah, in 1924, the land was purchased and was plotted in 1925 and opens up. So, which is River Oaks is 1924, Riverside Terrace is 1925. And what you have is it's funny because the Jewish community has always typically lived in large numbers on the east side of downtown where they originated. Crawford and Franklin Street, for example, perfect example. Beth Israel, 1853 is when the cemetery was built. 1854 is a synagogue. And so over time, they would continue to migrate further and further south. And at the time period, they were moving further and further south. At the same time, you had developers building homes in the area. So why they left River Oaks in 1952 and 53 during the white flight of River Oaks is a different story that I do talk about on my Riverside Terrace tour. So we do a separate Riverside Terrace because the who's who the Jewish community were located there. But you're absolutely right. It wasn't necessarily sold that way, just like River Oaks wasn't sold as a neighborhood that would not sell to anybody other than white folks that were white. It was like a gentleman's agreement. Same thing with Riverside Terrace. It was just like, sure, you're welcome to buy here.
It wasn't like blatant in the deed restriction.
Well, in River Oaks, there were written areas that said that, but it was more of a gentleman's agreement. So yes, in River Oaks specifically, yeah. Because think about this, it was all done as second homes for the wealthy. So that's what they were. They were country homes originally by the Country Club, which was founded back in 1923, River Oaks Country Club. And then, like I said, Riverside Terrace just happened to be being built at the same time that folks were not welcome there, but were welcome there. And that's why it ended up becoming so heavily populated. But then it transitioned. TSU, founded in 1947 in the area, African American college, and then over time transitions to actual university in the 60s. Early 60s was also a time when a lot of these Black professors were wanting quality homes to move
Yeah,
into.
the homes
And
are beautiful.
well, they're amazing, and they were amazing because they were built for that community, built them, right? And then they left, and there was an influx of inventory. At the same time, people are moving in the area that want quality homes similar to what they had in the north, and they're able to purchase those homes. So it's a very complicated conversation we have on board the bus, and it is complicated. All of Houston's history can be a little bit complicated, but less so than other parts because Houston has some skeletons, but you'd be surprised on how welcoming Houston has been since 1836 and how forward-thinking Houston has been. Maybe it's selfish, maybe Houston did that for business reasons, but Houston has only cared about one color, and that's green. And that has allowed Houston to move forward. The business community has often stood up for those less marginalized, saying, we don't really care if, do they have money to spend? Are they willing to contribute? Are they part of society? Let them in. Let them in. Who cares? And that's been our secret. Okay. MrMcKinney.com, Mr. McKinney's Historic Houston, Houston History Bus. Text me 713-364-8674. It's never a bother. I never get annoyed. I'm always on a bus, so it's always difficult sometimes to get hold of you right away, but I will. And then MrMcKinney@gmail.com if you got some long questions or whatnot. So yeah.
That's it for today.
Yay, 4:30.
So that's it, guys. That's all we're gonna talk about with Mr. McKinney today. Again, if you missed the recording, if you missed the Zoom or if we're not here live, it will be recorded and you can watch everything there. And if you want to see, is your presentation actually on Instagram?
No, if you follow us on Instagram, you'll see the things that we do. So the Instagram stories are what I post on. Like if I had my marketing intern here, they would be taking photos now and be doing this, and they'd be streaming it and all that great stuff. It doesn't happen right now. But just go to social media, just follow us. And I'm easy to get. You Google Mr. You got to spell it right. It's Mr. like Mr. Rogers. And that's the whole focus, to be like the Mr. Rogers, the educator of Houston history. That's all I care about. That's what's on the headstone.